Hi, it's Rachel. I want to talk just a little bit more about overcoming this fear because fear and all that it represents, right, has many, many faces. It prevents us from experiencing that love of God. Is a fear perception that we hold, okay, that is counter to holding that perception that we are greatly beloved by God. But in this dark place of the womb, it's very easy for that to grab a hold of us. But fear keeps us from experiencing that love, from that love flowing out, from us acting in that wisdom. And when I'm speaking, so the greatest weapons that we have against this fear is, right, you have to replace fear with something. You just can't stop fearing, you have to replace it. And that divine love is the most powerful thing that you can replace fear with, because it is more powerful than in that is the most powerful thing that you can possess. Okay, in a place without that, fear and intimidation are some of the most powerful emotions, okay, that drive and control us. So that divine love is so important. And remember, this love is far beyond our human capability. Okay, so it's far beyond our natural love. And that's why it's so important to understand its characteristics and how it actually is the summation of all the characteristics of the Heavenly Father. It is all consuming. It knows no bounds. It is a deep care and concern for others, that you truly want their peace and their well-being no matter who they are. Okay, it's a love that knows no judgments. It sees not the images, not the labels, not the classification, not the race, not the gender. It sees the soul. And it loves the soul. And it wants that soul to come into union with it. That divine love, it is so pure. It is full of honor and value, and it sees in the right perception because it's of God. Okay? And so when we start moving into that love, that's how we feel about other people. It's our love starts knowing no boundaries. We start removing all things that separate, and we just start seeing people in their individual state and in their individual soul and loving them and wanting their best. And so whenever we're interacting with them, that's what we desire to give them, is whatever we give them, a words, act, whatever it is, however brief it is, however long, however deep, or however thin or shallow, we want them to experience something that will help them, in whatever way. It's like love just wants to love. So it's very beautiful, and that's very powerful when you start acting in that framework and that mindset versus somewhere of fear. So especially like when you run into people, sometimes we fear people in our lives, or we fear things. The way to counter that is to love them instead. Love, not fear. And if we start understanding what that means on individual situations, that greatly helps us. So when you start feeling those fears, the stress, the anxieties, the overwhelming suffocation that sometimes you feel in that, the best thing that you can do is go and pray. And sometimes the last thing that you feel like doing, that take your notebook and write out what you feel, and seek that truth, seek that right perspective, seek to see from God's perspective your situation in you, to see through that divine love. But be honest and just let those prayers flow. Prayer is the most important thing that you can do, because in that fear, that's what you need more than anything else, is that communion. So it's so much better to just stop whatever you're doing and take time to try. And it can be very difficult, because once your spirit gets in that state, it's difficult. But if you go and just spend that time, that's what you need. You need that connection back to the Father. It's like your perception, you have temporarily become disconnected from that communion with Him. And that's what it brings on. That's how those fears come in. So it's going back to find that connection again. And sometimes your fears are that you don't have any connection. But that's where that faith, when you aren't in those fears, is to develop that faith on that solid foundation of the absolute truths of who he truly is, so that you'll be able to stand and move through them. And eventually, as I said, they dissipate as you continue to push through them. God does not want you to be in those fears. He wants you to come out of them. He wants you to be in that divine love more than anything, because that's what love desires. So that prayer is so important at that time. And there's no right way to pray. Prayer is just a communion. It is a honest, sincere conversation between you and God with a heart to know the truth and his love. That's what it's about. And the other thing, that as you spend this time and you grow and you start learning these truths and walking upon them, having a true faith, then when fears come up, you can look back in your life and go, wow, when I trusted God, even when my trust was wavering, look at how he provided. Look how he carried me through. Look at how it all turned out. Things worked out. Things were okay. You made it through. You're still here. And the more we learn to walk in his wisdom, the more okay we are, because we're not creating a chaotic reality for ourselves, but we're starting to act in the wisdom of God, and that creates smoother paths for us. So those two things are so important, that going to and having that time of prayer, and so establishing that good communion when you don't have the fears, when you're not facing them, is so important, because it's harder to get there because that fear is blocking you, right, in your perception. But if you have that, then you will go there, and what you do is actually, you get to a point when you feel fear, that's exactly where you go, because you understand that it's part of the unreal. But you go there and you pray and you find that wisdom and that counsel and that comfort. And even just the pouring out of your heart, even if you don't hear things or learn things, it's you're reaching out to reestablish that connection. Okay, so it's very important. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and actually I'll start that in my next video,